happy to be here. I love the eye that you all keep on what's going on and people's real felt experiences in the moment. And so I'm so happy to connect and be able to talk about what's going on. So, well, thank you for mentioning and for even seeing it. I appreciate that. So it was an article about, I guess, right now, a lot of people are trying to figure out like quick habits, simple tools, like what should they know about just living a more fulfilled life, like better managing their life. And so it's funny because I guess that's quote unquote what's trending, but I think it's ongoing. Like we always are just curious and a lot of us don't have a ton of time to do these like huge things or to overall our whole lives. Excuse me. And so it was an article where I share a couple of tips, one being more centered around community and making sure that you have those trusted relationships in your life to go to lean on, to be better supported. So important. And I think sometimes we minimize that, we gloss over it. But more recently, over the past few years, even the Surgeon General warnings are saying burnout, isolation, these are huge issues that are increasing at rapid rates. And so to really be mindful of things we can be doing, like leaning on community to create better experiences for ourselves. The other thing that I mentioned when being referenced was I was being referenced about just habits around creating sustainable habits. And that I think is so important. Like we can have these, audacious goals for ourselves, and that's wonderful. But I find that a lot of times people come to me about goals that when we break them down, it's really like this is a 3-year goal, this is a 5-year goal, and they're looking for things right now. And so sometimes what that can end up doing is taking up a lot of mental space and mental load on things that maybe you don't have to worry about so much right now in the moment. And so I help people to just like clarify the goal, clarify the timeline, and clarify across the pieces of their life, like not just look at the work goal, but that's why I love life coaching is looking at like what are your kids doing? Oh, they're switching schools, you're moving houses, you're
Yeah.
I am going to jump back to your previous question though too, because you asked about the reporter and how that even
Oh, yes,
happened.
yes.
I think that's connected in a small way because like this is what reporters are looking for information. Like they're looking, they were posing to see like experts, like this is just what's coming up. And so it's so connected to me when you're talking about this idea of being time poor. It's something that we're just like looking for more time and in a desperate way. Like, how can we create
Yeah.
more time for ourselves? Like, it's so timely. And so I really appreciate the question. I feel like what I'm seeing is that people are forgetting how much agency we really have. So even though there's a lot that we want to do, a thing that I keep coming back to with my clients is how can we focus in and zero in on like a core priority, even if it's just for the season, like what's the core thing for right now? Because it's so easy for us to gravitate towards multitasking. And like, especially if that's your role in life in other areas like you're a mom or you're a caretaker for others or you're caring for your parents, like you are multitasking a lot. And so what we want to avoid is that becoming so much of your default tendency that you feel like across all the parts of your life, you have to constantly multitask. And unfortunately, like spreading yourself so thin that you're not actually able to go an inch wide and a mile deep and really make significant progress towards your meaningful, bigger goals in your life. And so for going back to like thinking about a mom, for example, you have all of these professional goals, you have like work aspirations, different things that you're doing, and you're so used to multitasking that unfortunately you start spreading even your work goals short. You're kind of like taking a step back in ways without even really realizing it. And over a year, over 2 years before you know it, if it's in corporate, your peers are getting promoted over you. You're not having the success, the pay growth that you're looking for that you thought you would have. And in my experience over my time in HR, that's really how it like crept in on people. And before they knew it, they like turned around and they were like, wait a minute, why are these other people getting promoted
Right.
over me before you realize? And if you're in business, if you're a founder, it's not hitting the milestones that you wanted, it's not having the growth, the business milestones that you're looking for and that you set for yourself. And over time, just realizing that you're not as competitive in the marketplace as you thought you would be. I appreciate that. And you're right. Like, it's not like my perspective is one of, a therapist or a psychiatrist or that lane. And I think it may be even more important that you're asking me this question because I think that's such a huge part of it is sometimes the clients who come to me with, ADHD, with ADD, they're not sure really where to turn for the help, for the question, what the resource is that's most supportive to them. So I think even your asking is such a great way to highlight how we should approach things is, and this is across the board, whether you're neurodivergent or not, I really encourage people to evaluate what do they need? What are the conditions that help you to live, to work more optimally, and really be supported? Because in any setting, things can be tweaked to better support you if you know that that's an ask that you have. So all of the time, I have, for example, people in workplaces working on teams, maybe sometimes it's helpful for them to come off camera and they really need to like focus and listen inward, and that helps them. So it's not saying that like in every meeting, in every circumstance, everything can be adjusted and tailored, but maybe there's a specific meeting that the notes, it's optimal for you to do your job, to capture it really well. Maybe it's something small like recording a meeting so you can go back and watch it. Like these are little things that you can ask for. And people just think that they have to adapt to work into, the structure as it's already set. And it's just not the case. And even something like me, an outside service provider, sometimes when someone's coming to work with me, instead of, completely rewiring how they work to fit into my structure, I invite, like, what are those subtle tweaks? Sometimes it's like if we need to do Voxer messages, and that's easier for you to communicate between sessions because it's just an audio, it's just like walkie-talkie message versus you coming in and doing an email. Like there is no, we're not, this isn't written in concrete. We're able to adapt to one another's work styles. And so I just invite that. I know it sounds vague to say, ask for what you need, but
Yeah. I
hopefully it
don't think
goes.
it's
It's actually such a huge part of why I went into life coaching from being in HR is I actually felt like I noticed this trend of so many people not sure what to ask. Or to your point, like sometimes we hear things like, this organization is, embracing of
yeah.
diversity or,
What does that mean?
accommodating. Exactly. What does that mean? What does it look like? What's an example? And so your question also makes me think about the need for support, like even outside of just me. But if you are neurodivergent, like what groups are you a part of? What settings? Like who can you turn to who understands your lived experience to say, hey, like what is helping you? Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and so you don't even have a starting point. So putting yourself in those settings where you can start to build out your community of people. And so that's why for me it's become so important to build out a community where other working women can say, oh, like this is what's helped me. This is what I asked for. This is, a small tweak that I made that was really helpful. And even though, like a lot of what we're talking about, yes, corporate, that's absolutely like you can ask of ways to accommodate. Some women I work with in corporate, if they're really in an industry like it like legal where you have billable hours, it can feel really constrictive. Like you can't break that structure. And so we have to get creative. And that's why it's helpful to have an outside person. How can we creatively think of some ways to still give you what you need and work within this bigger structure that you're a part of? So that can be really helpful. But even outside of corporate, if you're a business owner, there can sometimes feel like this pressure that you have to think of all the things and have all the answers and design the perfect system. So hopefully that example I share of like, are the voice notes, are the messages going to help you? Like we can still bend even in our own businesses to assess need and find a response.
And I
And
think
yeah, so it depends. It depends. For some of my clients, I mean, the core of it is really looking at what they want for themselves. And so maybe there's, someone with billable hours, but they have a lot of familial responsibilities. So, like, are you okay with maybe taking a step back or taking a little bit longer in your professional trajectory to hit
yeah,
partner, to hit, some sort of milestone that you're working for? And that doesn't just apply to legal, but in sectors like that where it's billable, where it's like you're on a certain track and it takes time to fulfill that. But the other thing is sometimes going back to when I was saying like we have more control sometimes than we realize. And so sometimes it can be an opportunity where there's some middle option. What I find is that a lot of people tend to think of it as all or nothing. And sometimes when we get into these conversations of like, let's explore, like, what are the creative options? I've had people speak to their managers or speak to, the leadership in their organization and find out that it doesn't just have to be taking on another external project. Maybe there's some internal work where you could kind of bridge the gap and rather than saying, it's X amount of clients or it's X or Y, there's like this middle option. It's like, oh, you can go half on this internal project and that way you don't have to take double the amount of time
right.
for your goal, you can actually like still work towards it and support internally and people don't even think they don't even realize that these kinds of options exist until you ask and find the right way to be supported. What you're
Oh,
saying is so important because I think sometimes even if someone doesn't feel like they have it all figured out, they're just not sure where to turn or what that would look like. And the kinds of things we're talking about even today, where it's like if you're being supported and thinking about options for yourself, if you're asking better questions about your next step forwards or what you're
maybe, and the people who say that, sorry to interrupt you, I
oh,
feel like they'll talk to their friends a lot about their problems, maybe.
yeah.
And it's like maybe you should hire someone to talk
Yeah.
about these things with.
Yeah,
Like,
it can be both,
yeah,
right? Like you still have those other supports and maybe some, expert support that's guiding you in the direction you want to go. Because sometimes those people who only have like friends or family to turn to, it's like they don't fully, it never feels like they fully get out what they need to. You're in a conversation where like, yeah, then that person's cutting you off and talking about what's going on in their life, and you never fully work through what you need. But the other thing that what you're saying makes me think of is you being supported and what that could look like. I don't think we always realize the support that other people are getting. So, like, it's not like someone you're emulating or someone who you really admire is out there beating a drum saying, I work with a life coach. But a lot of leaders do. And it is this, I guess, a veiled support that a lot of people lean into and you don't even realize. We do live in a society that's very independent driven and also very kind of like reactive to support. So like you go to the doctor when
yeah,
you're
it's like
sick.
very negatively reactive, I think.
Yeah, like more of a reaction. And so to do the preserving, to do the, how can I keep things optimal? How can I, design ideal circumstances for myself? How can I really like think through what I need to thrive? We have to really like intentionally create the space to focus on those things. It doesn't come naturally. I love it. I think we can use some certain tools and resources to help us figure out where the misalignment might be stemming from. One thing I offer, I have a freebie and I'll make sure I give you the link. It's just 10 different, like, pretty easy things we can do to kind of invite more harmony into our lives. But at the start of it, it's actually a little thing where we start to look into our values a little bit more and figure out like what are your values so that you can figure out where is the misalignment? Like, are you prioritizing things day to day that aren't connected to your values? Or where you don't see your values in the big picture of how you're spending the bulk of your time. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is we're in this busy, like we said, we're time poor, and a lot of people don't know even where that time is going. So even if you do an audit for yourself, look at the week and
Right.
at the end of each day, ask yourself, like, how did this day feel? What felt off? Why didn't it feel good? If it didn't feel good, if it felt great, what am I holding on to and bringing into the rest of the days in the week to make them feel better and more aligned? So even the small thing that you can do to just like check in with yourself helps so that you can take more of what's working and find ways to push away what isn't serving you or it just isn't in alignment anymore. It might be different than 10 years ago, last year. It might be different than last month. We evolve. Yeah, and it can change, right? Like you can be in a setting that's like, okay, and you chose it for a reason. And then as life evolves, like we were talking about in those other parts of your life, you realize, you know what? Me missing this many dinners or me,
Yeah.
traveling away from my family or me, doing all of these, it's not serving my marriage, my family, my time for myself, my spiritual practice, whatever. And so I think that's also a big thing is giving yourself permission to say, hey, this served me for a season to get to where I am, and I need to adjust to get to where I'm going. Yeah, there's a reason why water and flow and the sense of that, the ripple effects, like why there's so much centered around the water. You're right. And allowing ourselves the ability to think about how we write our chapter. We don't have to write it alone, but to really think about like what's ahead of us on those pages and that you have agency. You have the ability to think about creating a chapter that works for you. I don't think we always remember that. Hmm. Make time and space for yourself. It doesn't have to be big. I'm not, saying we all have this abundance of time that we just don't have. But honestly, even 2 minutes at the start of your day to ground your day, to think about what good looks like, what the outcome is that you want to have can shift the trajectory. So, what is that time that you can create for yourself? 2 minutes. Like I said, I'll share that resource. And then if you're looking for an idea of what to do with the 2 minutes, it's right at your fingertips. But just easy ways to be intentional with the limited time we have.